Hello and welcome to my Rome Total War setup guide. Basically, just to give you the short version here, I played a campaign as the Seleucid Empire this year. I had no crashes, enjoyed my time, even had pretty stable FPS, and so I thought I would go ahead and share how exactly I had set it up, just in case the guide here and the tips here might help someone else. Now, this is the short version of the setup, though if I'm going too fast, then you can still pause the video or use YouTube's controls to slow me down, or even speed me up if you feel that I'm going too slowly. Since this is the short version of the guide, I'm just going to explain how I set things up, but not really go into depth as to why. If you want all of the long, in-depth explanation as to why I do what I do, then go and watch the long version of this guide. The short version basically assumes that you just want to get things set up and get going, and you don't care for the lengthier explanations. And that's also why the long version will probably include some additional setup with some extra third-party programs, but since those programs cost money, and I think it's a little more subjective as to how useful those might be, I'm actually going to leave those for the long version. Again, the short version of the guide is just get it up and running in a decent amount of time and with decent frame rate and stability. So let's begin. All right, so the first thing we're going to need to do is install Rome Total War, which we are going to be using the Steam version. So just click install, pick where exactly it is you want it to install to. I'm just going to throw it onto my D drive and wait for it to finish. Now, I do not know how well any of what I'm about to discuss will work with the disc version. I kind of assume that it'll work just fine. But I didn't test it with the disc version, I tested it with the Steam version, so if you're using the disc version, you can let me know how things went in the comments down below. Once the game is finished installing, don't hit play quite yet. There's just a couple of things we need to do outside of the game first. So go ahead and right-click on Rome Total War and go to Properties. You'll want to add a couple of launch options that you can see right here. That's -NE and -show_ERR with a space between them. You'll also want to disable the Steam overlay if it's enabled, so basically just toggle it off like so. And now you're ready to go ahead and load the game, so go ahead and hit play. I'm going to be using the original campaign for now, though most of what we are doing will apply to Barbarian Invasion, but I'll talk about that a little later. Now you'll notice a couple of problems, but one of them is actually that the screen is quite small and the music's actually a little loud. Give me just a second. Alright, so I've just muted the music for now, but of course we still have the issue of the game actually being quite small and kind of in the corner of the screen here. So what we'll want to do is actually adjust its resolution. Basically what is happening right now is the game is running in windowed mode, and it's at the resolution, the default resolution. So if we go to Options, and then we go to Audio Settings, because I just realized that that's actually quite loud. There we go. So anyway, we go to Options, we go to Video Settings, and you'll notice that the default resolution here is 124 by 768, and that's why it's kind of up in the corner of the screen like this. Now, I would like to switch it to 1440, which is my resolution, 2560 by 1440 rather. As you can see, it actually doesn't go that high. It only goes up to 1920 by 1440. So what am I to do? Well, what I'm going to do is actually exit back out of the game. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to set my resolution in the Preferences file for the game. So right-click on Rome Total War again, and under Manage, go to Browse Local Files, and it'll pull up the folder where Rome Total War is installed to. Go to Preferences, go to Preferences.txt, and if you scroll just a bit down here, you'll see Strategy Resolution, Strategy Max Resolution, and then the same too for the battle down here. And like I said, my resolution is for my monitor is 2560 by 1440, so I'm just going to change that here. And as you can see, I've changed it in all four places here, 2560 by 1440 under these four options here. Now, I don't know how much higher you can go than that, like if you can go up to 4K or 8K or whatever, but this is how high I've been able to go, and it looked fine to me. Let's go ahead and just save that. Then when we close out of this and go back to play the game, it should now be full screen. And so as you can see, it's now filling up my entire screen here. And if we go to Options and we go to Video Settings, as you can see, we have 2560 by 1440. in both strategy map resolution and the battle map resolution, so that's fantastic. Now under Show Advanced Options, you can actually set this basically however you want. I did put everything up as high as it can go when I ran my Seleucid Empire campaign. The only exception here is the Unit Detail option, which you'll want to make sure is anything other than the highest. You can put it high, medium, low, lowest, just don't ever put it up to the highest. Alright, so now that I have everything set the way that I want them to be, I'm going to go ahead and go back and go to the control settings really quick. Because this is a game back from a time when, instead of using W, A, S, and D for your movement keys, they actually used the arrow keys, so you can see up, down, left, and right here. So we'll want to change those to W, A, S, and D, or just whatever keys you prefer. Alright, and there you have it. I have all of my keys changed to the way that I like them. So now let's go ahead and exit out of the game. We've basically done everything that we would need to do inside of the game itself to get it prepared. The next thing we're going to want to do is go to a website and get a 4GB patcher. Here is the link here on the screen, but I will also have it in the description down below, so you can just click on it. Once your eyes have finished adjusting to the bright white of the background of this web page, go ahead and click on Download the 4GB patch. Once it has finished downloading, go ahead and open it up and extract it. I'm using 7-zip. If you're using the built-in Windows extraction utility, it might look a little different, but either way, just go ahead and extract it to wherever you want, so long as you can find it again later. What you're going to want to do then is go ahead and run this. We're going to have to find Rome Total War, the executables, because that's what we're going to run this 4GB patch on. Now, a simple way to do that is to actually go back to Steam, and you can go to Manage and Browse Local Files. This is where we went to earlier when we were adjusting the Preferences file. You can actually see up here, this is the location. This is actually the install location for Rome Total War here. So I can just go ahead and right-click and copy that. And then right-click and paste it in here, hit Enter on my keyboard, and it takes me right here. And the two executables are RomeTW and RomeTW-BI. You might not have the .exe on the end there if you have your file extensions hidden, which in Windows I believe it is by default. But regardless, you should still have at least RomeTW and RomeTW-BI. So go ahead and select RomeTW. It'll be done basically an instant, so then go ahead and hit another file, and this time select RomeTW-BI. Once again, it'll be done in basically an instant, and just hit OK, and you'll be done. You can actually tell it worked because now, in addition to Rome Total War, or RomeTW.exe, you now have the same thing, but with a dot backup on the end, and the same with the BI extension down here as well. Now, the next thing you'll want to do is go to another website. This time it's a GitHub repository for DXVK. Again, I'll have the link in the description down below, so you can just click on that. Now, DXVK is actually updated fairly regularly, so depending on when you see this video, this may not be the latest version. This is the version that I used for most of my playthrough, though. I think I did use an earlier version for like the first chunk of it, though, so again, depending on when you see this, this may not be the latest version, but I would say go ahead and try whatever the latest version is at the time you are trying to do your install, and only if maybe you have problems with that version, maybe go back to an older one. But what you'll want to do is go ahead and click on the tar.gz download down here. Now, once it's finished installing, we need to extract a couple of files from it, and once again, I am using 7-zip to do the extraction. I believe the built-in Windows extractor will still work, but if it doesn't, go ahead and go get 7-zip. Now, the files we're looking for are inside, a couple layers deep here. We want to go to the X32 folder, and we want the D3D8 and the D3D9 files, so go ahead and extract those. What we want to do is we want to put them in the same folder where those executables were earlier. So highlight both of them and then cut. And once again, you can do what you did earlier to get to those executables. Just right-click on Rome Total War in Steam, go to Browse Local Files, then just right-click and paste. And now you can see the files are right next to the executables here and in the same directory. So at this point, we're very close to the end here now. In fact, if you intend on playing the Grand Campaign as one of the Roman factions, then you're actually, strictly speaking, already done. But if you want to play as any of the other factions, you'll notice they haven't been unlocked yet. So very quickly, I will show you how to unlock those factions without having to actually beat them in the campaign, because that's actually what you had to do, was actually defeat them as one of the other factions in order to then unlock them here in this screen. But we don't need to do that. We can go ahead and adjust a text file outside of the game to basically just unlock them all right away. Now, to get to that text file, what you'll want to do is, once again, right-click, browse local files, then go into the data folder here, then go to the world folder, maps, campaign, Imperial campaign. Now, that's a bit long, so I'll just highlight it there, but remember, you can also go back, pause the video, slow me down if necessary, whatever you need to do to make sure that you can actually get to this folder here. And the file we're looking for is the desker_strat. I'm assuming that's short for description. Well, let's go ahead and open that one up. Now, right here, right at the top of the file, you don't need to scroll down at all. You can actually see here are the playable factions, which currently is just the Roman factions, the Julii, and then the 2 Roman pretender factions. Then you have the unlockable factions in this section here. Then you have the non-playable factions here. If you already know just which faction you want to play as, you can just go ahead and cut and paste that faction. Just right-click cut, and then hit enter to make a little space, and then right-click paste. And so now if I go back into the game, Egypt will be an option for me to play as well. Now, I don't like leaving any extra spaces or anything, so I'm also going to just backspace and get rid of the little space where Egypt used to be down here. If you want them all, you can of course just highlight all of them, right-click cut, hit enter to make a space, and then right-click paste. Now, all of these factions will be playable here, and I am just going to remove that space there between unlockable and end. I'm not actually going to delete the section because I believe that might cause issues, but just leaving it empty should be fine. Now, these are all the factions that you were intended to play as. These obviously non-playable ones were ones you were not intended to play as. However, you actually can play as most of them. In fact, the only ones that I would recommend not putting in the playable section would be the Roman Senate and the Slave faction. Now, the Slave faction is actually just the rebel faction in the game. But you can still drag and take all of these other factions, right-click cut, right-click paste, and add them up here as well, making sure it looks like Macedon needs a little backspace there to line it up. Again, I don't actually know if having it like misaligned or with an extra space anywhere actually matters, but I like to make sure it stays as close to the original as possible with no sections missing and any extra spaces that I've created removed, just to make sure that everything is correct. Then just make sure you save the file, and there you go. Basically, every faction you can play as should now be unlocked when you go and start the campaign. As you can see, now that I go back to the Imperial campaign, we have a lot more factions to choose from. Now, my understanding is that you can still play as the Senate or the Rebels if you want to, but also my understanding is that there's some issues that can arise, some problems if you try, and I don't feel it's appropriate for a short installation guide to go through that. So here's all the factions that you can play as, and you really shouldn't experience any issues playing with any of these factions here. Now, the last thing I would like to go over, if all you care about is the Grand Campaign for the original Rome Total War, you don't care about Barbarian Invasion or Alexander, is just the Preferences files really quick. We did look at them earlier by going to Browse Local Files again, Preferences, and then the Preferences.txt file. This is where we changed the resolution earlier. I'll leave a copy of this Preferences file in the description, like I'll have a link to download it or something. But basically, just in case there was anything else here that you wanted to see, anything you wanted to compare and contrast with your own Preferences file, you can go ahead and look at it there. I don't think there's anything in particular that I would recommend changing other than the resolutions that we, of course, did earlier in the video. but I thought it was worth mentioning that at least there were some other things that I think I have changed in the past, but I'm not sure how important they really are. So you can look at that file if you have any interest. To be clear, many of these preferences are not visible in the game, and so the only way to change them is through this text file here. So for example, you can see that I've actually disabled unit banners by changing this from true to false. That option isn't in the game, so you would only be able to do that through this preferences file, and there's some other settings that are like that. So again, you can take a look at that if you want. Another thing you might have noticed, both in-game and in the preferences file, there wasn't any options for VSync or really any sort of frame limiting. So if you do want to use VSync or limit your frames in any way, you will have to use your graphics card's control panel, or if you want like a third-party program, I've used Riva Tuner Statistics Server to limit frame rates before, so you can use that one. But there's no in-game or in this preferences file, there's no way to actually turn on VSync or to limit your frames, so you'll have to do that through other means. Now, it's also worth noting that all of your preferences are basically stored in this file here, except for your controls, which are actually stored in this file here, the keys.dat file. And once again, if you don't have extensions enabled, it'll just say keys instead of keys.dat, but it hardly matters. It should say either keys or keys.dat. So these two files are actually kind of important, and if you want, you can copy them someplace else and just keep them backed up. So if you ever choose to install Rome Total War again in the future, you can actually just copy and paste those right into this folder. You won't have to reset them all up again next time you choose to install Rome Total War. Now, that's actually basically it. If all you cared about was the grand campaign for the original Rome Total War, stick around for a bit more about Barbarian Invasion and the Alexander campaigns. For Barbarian Invasion, actually everything you've done for the base game has actually pretty much been done for Barbarian Invasion as well. So the 4GB patcher, DXVK, all of that is actually already done. In fact, the only thing that you really have to do now is actually reset up the preferences and the keys files. But you actually don't really need to, because you've already done it for the base game here, and you can actually just copy and paste these files into Barbarian Invasion. Now, to do that, what you'll want to do is just make sure both of the files are highlighted and right-click and copy. Then go back one folder, and you should see a BI folder here at the top. Go into Preferences, and you'll see there might already be a Preferences file there. There might already be a Keys file there. It depends on whether you've already started Barbarian Invasion or not, but it doesn't matter. Just right-click and paste. If it asks you to replace the files, say yes. If it doesn't, then it's probably just because those files aren't there already. And so now, when you go to start up Barbarian Invasion, just hit play on Rome Total War, and this time select Launch Rome Total War Barbarian Invasion. As you can see, everything is full screen. If you go into your options, into your video settings here, you'll notice your resolution's correct. All of the details that you selected here are correct, as they were in the base game. If you go into your controls, you'll see that they are as they were in the base game as well. So you don't really need to go into the game and reset everything up for Barbarian Invasion. You can just copy those two files over and basically be done. Now, just like with the base game, you actually can change a file inside of your data folder that will actually unlock some additional factions for you to play as in Barbarian Invasion. The file's location is in BI, Data, World, Maps, Campaign, Barbarian Invasion, and it's the same name, Desker_strat. Now, I have actually already changed the file here, just so you can see these are the factions that you can go ahead and just move over into playable. The unlockable section was actually already empty. So all these factions that I moved up into the playable section actually came from the non-playable section. Now, my understanding is that you actually can play as all of these factions, though my understanding further is that you need to do some extra work to get these factions working. And so, since it's a bit beyond the scope of a short install guide, I haven't moved them over, but if you want to go looking for some guides that tell you how to get these factions working as well, then feel free to go look that up. I believe To Nerd is to Human actually has some videos on those. And if I can find them, I'll actually put them in the description for you guys to easily see. Now, to set up Rome Total War Alexander, unfortunately, you do need to essentially go through the whole guide again, because it is a separate install over here in Steam. So you have downloaded everything you need, so it should be a little bit faster. In fact, we'll run through it here really quickly just to show you some of the slight differences that exist between Alexander and the base game's install, and just some shortcuts you can do to make things a little faster with Alexander anyways. So, click on Rome Total War Alexander and go ahead and install it. Once it's finished installing, let's just go ahead and copy the launch options from the base game. So go to the properties for the base game, and you can actually just right-click and copy those. Then right-click on Alexander, go to its properties, and you can actually just paste them right there. They're the same launch options, and if your Steam overlay is turned on, you can just turn it off right there. Now, you don't need to change any of the preferences or the key bindings in-game. You can actually just take them right from the base game. So once again, right-click on Rome Total War and go to Browse Local Files. Go to the Preferences folder here, highlight Preferences and Keys, and then right-click and copy. You can then right-click on Alexander, browse Local Files, go to Alexander. Now, since we haven't actually started the game up, there is no Preferences folder here. I'm actually just going to go ahead and create one. You can, if you want, just start the game up and then immediately exit it, and then it'll create the folder there for you. Then we'll go inside of the folder and we'll paste those two files in there. If you let the game create the folder and the files for you, then you can just overwrite them. Next, we're going to use that 4 GB patcher that we used on the base game and the Barbarian Invasion executables. Now we're going to use it on Alexander. So if you go back to your downloads folder, you should still have your 4 GB patcher in there. So just go ahead and right-click and run as administrator. Now we'll do the same thing as we did with Rome Total War, the base game. So we can just right-click on Rome Total War Alexander over here and go to Browse Local Files, and here is the path that we need. So we'll just right-click and copy, and we'll pull the software back up again, and we're just going to paste it right up here. Right-click and paste. Enter on the keyboard, and you can see there's the two executables that we want right there. So I'm just going to select Rome Total War-ALX first. Then I'm going to select another file, and I'm going to select testappa.exe. I assume that's short for application. Then go ahead and hit OK. And so now, actually, if you go back to that folder again, just like we did with the base game, you should now see that there's two backup files that correspond with the two executables that we just basically patched to use 4 GB. Now, for DXVK, it's even easier. You actually don't even need to go back to your downloads folder. You can just right-click on the Rome Total War folder, go to Browse Local Files, and those two files that we copied from it, the D3D8 and the D3D9 files, should actually just still be here. So you can just right-click and copy those. Then go to the Alexander files, right-click and paste. And there you go. Now you've got DXVK and the 4 GB patch set up for Alexander. And so now if you fire up Rome Total War Alexander, everything should be as it was in the base game and in Barbarian Invasion. So if you go to your options and to your video settings, you'll have the correct resolution, all of your settings will already be selected, and your control settings will also be as they were in the base game and in Barbarian Invasion. Just a way to kind of skip over having to set those all up again. And with that, the video comes to an end. Regardless of which campaign you chose to play, you should be good to go. I haven't tested this setup with any modded campaigns or anything, but if you intend on trying it with one of them, feel free to let me know in the comments down below. It's just, in general, any thoughts you may have had on the guide, maybe some extra tips that I was unaware of that you think might be useful for other people who are watching this video. I did mention that there would be a longer guide a couple of times in this video. I don't know when that one will come out, but if this guide interested you and you think maybe a more in-depth explanation would be something you'd like to see, then hopefully that one's already out by the time you see this. If not, please look forward to it. But in either case, please like and subscribe, and enjoy your next Rome Total War campaign.